Growing up, as most people in Europe, I was really afraid of Iraq. I mean, everything I saw about the country and everything I heard about the country seemed to be really dangerous and unsafe, to say the least. However, during my travels over the last 6 years, I've realized that quite often the places we're most afraid of turned out not being as bad. So then I packed my bags and traveled to the northern part of Iraq called Iraqi Kurdistan, where I met a lot of awesome people, had great foods, explored caves and towns and villages. I even hitchhiked and hung out with soldiers and did so much more. If you watch the video until the end, you'll obviously see all of my adventures, and I really hope that this video will be one of the many arguments out there for why we need to make peace and not war. Welcome to one of the most feared countries in the world, Iraq.
The Kurds are the world's largest ethnic group that currently do not have their own independent country. Comprising of over 30 million people, the Kurds make up the fourth largest ethnic group in the Middle East and inhabit mountainous regions straddling the borders of Turkey, Iraq, Syria, Iran, and Armenia. In the early 20th century, many Kurds began to consider the creation of a homeland, generally referred to as Kurdistan. After World War I and the defeat of the Ottoman Empire, the victorious Western Allies made provision for a Kurdish state in 1920. Such hopes were dashed 3 years later, however, when the Treaty of Lausanne made no provision for a Kurdish state and left Kurds with minority status in their respective countries. Despite establishing a short-lived Kingdom of Kurdistan and numerous other attempts to gain independence or at least autonomy, nothing really bore long-lasting results until the national uprising that began in all of Iraq in 1991. You see, at that time, Saddam Hussein was busy trying to occupy Kuwait because of its oil reserves, and as a result, the people in Iraq, both south and north, started a countrywide uprising that spread to most of Iraq's provinces in a matter of days. However, when Saddam's ruthless army came back, everyone had to flee to the borders of Iran and Turkey in a massive exodus of nearly 2 million people, 75% of whom were Kurdish. When the international community realized what was happening in northern Iraq, the United States and the coalition forced Saddam to withdraw his armies and established a no-fly zone over the region. Bloody clashes between Iraqi forces and Kurdish troops continued, and after an uneasy and shaky balance of power was reached, the Iraqi government fully withdrew its military and other personnel from the region in October 1991, allowing the region to function de facto independently, giving birth to the autonomous region of Iraqi Kurdistan.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm finally in Iraq. What? Check this out. That's the airport right there. Good stuff. Absolutely can't wait to explore. Super excited.
I left the airport as fast as I could, hopped into a taxi, and felt so excited I couldn't hold it in.
This is amazing. Amazing.
It felt really crazy to see Baghdad on the road signs, but apart from that, everything looked very normal and actually quite modern.
Okay, finally checked into my hotel. Let's go check out the room. It's just here. This is not just a bed. It's a bed in Iraq. Amazing.
The next morning I woke up as early as I could and went out to explore the capital of Iraqi Kurdistan, called Erbil.
The traffic here is crazy. I'm trying to cross the road, but apparently it's not the easiest task in the world. Though it's working.
It was early Friday morning, which in Iraq is the weekend, and because of that, the local market was absolutely packed with people and merchants selling all kinds of goods. From old DVD players and second-hand shoes to hardware tools and clothing to delicious foods and drinks, all of that and more was for sale. Then I proceeded to the city center of Erbil, where they had a much more established market dating from the Ottoman period. The goods were so appealing this time that I even got myself an awesome Kurdish souvenir.
I'm currently buying a really cool Kurdish style hat. Let's try it on. Nice. You think it's good?
Very nice.
Very nice.
Then it was time to explore. I decided to take a long walk around the whole city, but everyone was so happy to see me, it was super hard to make progress.
Hello, how are you?
It's so interesting. I'm in Iraq, walking on these streets completely alone, and I feel totally safe here.
Eventually I came to the largest public park in Erbil that was built on the site of one of Saddam Hussein's most infamous detention centers after his regime fell. Today, the peaceful oasis covers several hectares and is the perfect place for anyone wishing to escape the hustle and bustle of the city and relax big time. When I left the park, I decided to check out the largest and the most beautiful mosque in Erbil, known as the Jalil Kayat Mosque.
So apparently, they don't really let people inside this mosque. But they saw that I was filming and I guess they liked it, so now they let me. It's insane here.
The mosque was begun by Jalil Kayat, who died in 2005 before its completion. However, Jalil's sons finished the mosque in 2007 in memory of their beloved father. The mosque is 15,000 square meters large and holds about 2,000 people. Not only is it large, but also has been cited as one of the most beautiful mosque interiors in the Middle East. I definitely couldn't agree more. Having checked out the mosque, I proceeded to a place I certainly never expected to find in Iraq, a modern shopping mall. The mall had hundreds of different stores selling thousands of different things, as well as a large food court with internationally recognized brands. What?
This mall is completely packed. Honestly, the who wants to spend their weekends at the park when you can go to a mall and have yourself a burger? No one, not even in Iraq.
At that point, it was already getting late, so I went back to the city center that was teeming with action and entered the citadel of Erbil. That's a famous UNESCO World Heritage Site, as well as one of the oldest continuously inhabited human settlements in the world, dating back to 5,000 years before Christ.
I just came inside the citadel at the very center of Erbil, and as opposed to just being a big tourist attraction, which is the case in most other cities, this is actually a huge, super cool public space. So there's no entrance fees, you can just get in anytime you like, and there's so many people here hanging around, drinking, eating foods, whatever. And it's a very exciting place. I think it's completely packed, very cool. There's so many young people here as well.
Eventually I went to a local coffee shop and watched the sunset over the horizon in the beautiful city of Erbil. The next morning, things got real. You see, my awesome friend Gabriel, who's been traveling the world for longer than I've been alive, flew into Iraq to explore the country with me for a couple of days. So we rented a car together and went for it.
Road trip!
Here we go, man. Exploring Iraq. Unbelievable.
Iraq. Yay!
At first, the roads were nothing out of the ordinary, but then we finally reached the mountains where the local people were incredibly friendly, and the views, well, they were so good we could hardly believe them.
Who would guess that this is Iraq?
Me.
Yeah.
Me, I would.
There's more to this country than, you see in the news.
Later in the evening, we hopped into a cable car and went up the mountain in search of our hotel, located in a popular ski resort in the mountains.
I just woke up in this pretty epic Iraqi mountain lodge, and check out the views. Wow.
I honestly never expected to find myself in a fancy ski resort while traveling around Iraq, and it was super awesome to be there, as it was the low season and thus it was practically empty and incredibly peaceful and calm. What a beautiful place. Later that day, we once again hit the road and continued exploring as much as we could.
Just stopped at a completely random Kurdish village by the side of this beautiful river. Oh my What was that? He probably thinks I'm carrying a gun or something. Wow. Okay, let's go the other way.
Even though the donkeys in that village weren't very welcoming, the people certainly were. A few minutes later, we got invited to have tea with this beautiful local family, which was loads of fun. Later that night, we arrived to this tiny mountain town called Amedi, where the kids shot us at football, where the sunset took our breaths away, and where the local people were incredibly friendly, as everywhere in Iraqi Kurdistan.
Ahmed,
very nice name.
Jacob, Ahmed. Man, the people here are so friendly. It's incredible. What do you think, Gabriel?
Absolutely. People have been amazing.
Yeah. Everyone's welcoming us as if we're, I don't know, the most important guests ever. People are inviting us to their whatever workplaces. I've gotten so much free stuff already. Free teas, free waters, free snacks, free sweets. Wow.
The following morning, we checked out the old palace of Saddam Hussein that was abandoned when his regime collapsed and was later turned into a military base where, unfortunately, we weren't allowed to visit. So we hit the road again and arrived to the holiest place in the world for this ancient religion called Yazidism. Yazidism is a monotheistic faith followed by the Yazidi people and based on belief in one God who created the world and entrusted it into the care of 7 holy angels. The interesting thing about the Yazidis is that they believe in reincarnation, which is very unique among the people of the Middle East. As beautiful as their faith is, the Yazidis were actively persecuted by both Saddam and later by ISIS, who had a strong foothold in Iraq, which is where the majority of the Yazidi people live. That is why these days there are not that many people still practicing Yazidism. However, despite all the incredible obstacles these people faced, they still managed to retain their holy place called Ladish.
I'm inside the main temple. It honestly looks more like a cave than a temple. They don't have any images of saints or statues or something like this. Yeah, apparently a few people are sleeping here or something. Maybe people who are guarding the temple, I don't know. They have this one thing that looks like an altar, but I'm not sure.
When we got out of the temple, we ran into a group of wonderful Yazidi people who invited us to spend time together.
How is it?
Good, yeah.
Good. Hey. Oh, this is very good.
Thank you so much.
Eventually, back at the parking lot, I made friends with a really cool local army guy who wanted to show me his dorm and his gun. What?
Wow! Wow, crazy.
Then we once again hit the gorgeous mountain roads of Iraqi Kurdistan, taking short breaks in beautiful locations for some levitating yoga, until we arrived to this really interesting place where there were hundreds of huge rocks, all painted in bright colors. You see, in the 90s, after gaining autonomy, there was a civil war in Kurdistan. A well-known Kurdish artist by the name of Ismail Kayat was fed up with all the unrest and decided to paint a mountainside in the center of one of the worst areas for the bloodshed. He also inscribed the words "Peace for Kurdistan" in Kurdish, Arabic, and English, amongst other peace symbols and words. This included the statement that this place is not for fighting, it is for picnics.
Did you expect this from Iraq? No. Does it exist in Iraq? Yes. Very much so.
That day was unfortunately the last day that Gabriel and I were traveling together, so we had a beautiful dinner and said goodbye.
Okay, so Gabriel already left, and with that we also gave back the rental car. However, right now I really want to go to this other big city here in Iraqi Kurdistan, but I don't have any transportation. So because every single person I've ever met here turned out to be really, really friendly, I thought I might as well hitchhike and see where life takes me. So right now I'm walking to this really big highway here around Erbil, and hopefully it's gonna work out well. We'll see. Mom, if you're watching, don't worry, I should be fine.
I was trying to hitchhike for the next 30 minutes, but every car that stopped told me they weren't going to the place I wanted to go to because I was not far enough on the highway. So eventually I hopped into a taxi with this super stylish Kurdish driver and arrived to the 3rd largest city in Iraqi Kurdistan called Suleymaniye, where I met this bloody legend by the name of Barakan. The next morning, Badakan took me around his beautiful home city. Suleymaniye is a very modern and tolerant city that's widely known as the cultural capital of Iraqi Kurdistan, since it's always been a center of great poets, writers, historians, scholars, and singers. The city also boasts the largest market in all of Iraqi Kurdistan and definitely the craziest food I've ever seen in the Middle East.
Incredible! My brother Barakan just finished 2 bowls of tongues and brains
and eyeballs.
and eyeballs. Look at that! Look at all that food. Show us your hands. Yes, look at this beard.
Apart from showing me his favorite crazy foods, Badakan also told me so much about the city's history, which apparently is really fascinating. Remember the Kingdom of Kurdistan that I mentioned before? Well, its capital was none other but the city of Suleymaniye. You see, after World War I, the British and other Western powers occupied parts of the Ottoman Empire and Britain was designated as the mandate power. The British had promised the Kurds during the Great War that they would receive their own land to form a Kurdish state. However, the British did not keep their promise and the Kurdish people were really unhappy, so they revolted. To try to solve the situation, the British tried to establish a puppet government in the region and so appointed a popular local leader called Mahmud Barzanji. However, Mahmud didn't want to stay under the British control. He wanted to gain independence. Very soon, Suleymaniye was declared the capital of the Kingdom of Kurdistan, and Mahmud himself became the first and the only king of Kurdistan. By 1920, Mahmud, to British displeasure, was using his power against the British by starting uprisings. The rebellion lasted until Mahmud was wounded in combat. Captured by British forces, he was sentenced to death but later imprisoned in a British fort in India. Even though he managed to come back from India and continue revolting against the British, his future attempts weren't as successful. However, he became a national hero and is still remembered today with displays of him around Suleymaniye. You know what's the craziest part of this story? Mahmud was actually the great-grandfather of none other but my boy Bada Khan. One of the first places Bada Khan took me to was this large old cigarette factory that was turned into a beautiful creative space for young Kurdish people who want to write books, create art, play music, and do all sorts of other creative things.
Man, this place is huge and so beautiful. Look at all the wall art and all the graffitis and all the installations and stuff. It's incredible. There's quite a few people doing arts, discussing poetry right there. And they even have a cinema, what? It's insane. Wow. And apparently the monthly fee is only $3.50. So, yeah, that's definitely good value for money. Wow. If I lived here, I'd definitely be a loyal member.
On our way out of the creative space, we checked out this very emotional photo exhibition dedicated to the victims of the fight against the terrorists, and later went to the old intelligence headquarters of Saddam's regime. This place is of incredible significance to the people of Suleymaniye because this is the first place that the people attacked and took down during the national uprising of 1991. These days, it's been turned into a museum to showcase the crimes committed by Saddam's regime. It's also home to a striking hall of mirrors, an exhibit dedicated to the thousands who died during Saddam's war against the Kurds. Its only corridor is lined with shards of mirrors, each one representing the thousands of Kurds killed by Saddam during his campaign.
I'm currently standing on top of a random tank here at the museum in the city center of Suleymaniye. Apparently there's so many of them everywhere you go. Look at that. Everywhere, all around me right now. These things are huge. So deadly, so dangerous. If any of our technologies are really sad, that has to be tanks. So unfortunate we have these things, really. So unfortunate.
The next morning, we hopped into Bada Khan's car and went on a road trip high up in the mountains. We visited quite a few different ancient monuments, tiny villages, and beautiful natural sites until we came to the first destination of our trip, the city of Halabja, that is home to one of the saddest events in the history of Iraqi Kurdistan. You see, in 1988, in the final stages of the Iran-Iraq war, the Kurdish guerrillas captured Halabja. After 2 days of conventional artillery attacks, Iraqi planes dropped gas canisters on the town in a large-scale chemical attack on the local population. At least 5,000 people died as an immediate result of the chemical attack, and it is estimated that a further 7,000 people were injured or suffered long-term illness. This was the first time in history that a government used chemical weapons on their own people, which was an incredibly sad event in Iraq's history.
Inside the building, they also have a museum where they're showing the replicas of some of the most famous photos taken throughout that time, and it's such a sad memory.
I felt devastated after learning about this catastrophe, but my brother Bada Khan told me that his fellow countrymen have definitely been through so many crazy events in the past. But we shouldn't feel too sad about it. We should learn from those horrendous mistakes and make sure to do all we can to prevent things like this from happening in the future. And so we went on our one final adventure together, hiking with his friends in the mountains of Iraqi Kurdistan.
The Kurdish people and their mountains, eh? They love each other.
Look at that.
Badr is a mountain man.
Hopefully.
Legend!
Having hiked for quite a bit, we made ourselves a wonderful picnic together while watching the sunset over the gorgeous, gorgeous horizon. When the sun finally set, it was time to explore the coolest place I had visited throughout my time in Iraqi Kurdistan, an absolutely incredible 2-kilometer long cave.
We're trying to go inside one of the caves. The entrance is so narrow. I can hardly fit. Oh, I need to crawl. Look at that. It's crazy. Dang.
The reason these caves were so fascinating was not only because they were so long and so big, but also because thousands of guerrilla soldiers used to live there during Saddam's regime, which is simply incredible given how humid and dark the place really is.
In this part of the cave, the ceiling is actually super high. I don't know, probably 15 meters. Obviously can't film it with this camera, but it's really, really high. And it's so humid in here. I feel like I'm sweating all over. It's incredible. And imagine, I mean, so many people had to live here for many, many years in these conditions. 2 kilometers, thousands of people probably stayed here inside. It's insane. Okay, so apparently we just came to the very end of the cave, which is 2 kilometers away from the entrance. And here they have this tiny gap. So apparently if you lay down, you could go to the other side and pop out. But it's really narrow here. Incredible. I don't even know if I could get through. Oh, maybe. Crazy. Look at all the mud and everything on the walls. Crazy.
Then we walked 2 kilometers all the way back to where we came from, and exiting the cave was certainly not as easy as we thought.
Ah! The bat hit me! Yeah. The bat hit me, man! Oh my god! There's so many in the... One just hit him! No! Dude, just one more! Oh my god, please! Don't! There were like 5 that hit me!
Yeah.
Man!
Yeah. I got one going up my back.
I know, I saw it! Oh my god!
You made it safely.
Yes!
Welcome back.
Then we caught up with even more of Badakan's awesome friends and had so much fun camping in the wild. Traveling around Iraqi Kurdistan, I witnessed so much hospitality, warmth, and kindness that it simply blew me away. I experienced firsthand how positive and friendly the local people really were. They hosted me, they took me around, they kept giving me free things, they played with me and welcomed me as if I was one of their own. You know what felt a little bitter though? The fact that most people, including me, would never expect to experience something like this in that part of the world. Because we're afraid of things we don't know, afraid of people we haven't met, afraid of places we hardly know anything about. However, this trip once again proved to me that reality is generally very different, because most people are very kind, friendly, and welcoming in every part of the world.